I take refuge in the devil, fallen for freedom's sake.
I take refuge in the witchcraft, path of wisdom made power.
I take refuge in the damned, cast out, fallen, and forsaken.
May all beings have freedom and the causes of freedom. May all beings be free from slavery and the causes of slavery.
May all beings enjoy that freedom that knows no slavery.
May all beings live deliciously, free from ignorance and oppression. Jason Miller. So today, we are going to be talking about the devil. Dun dun dun. I'm surprised we've made it this far and we haven't done a devil episode yet, honestly.
We haven't?
Now that I really think about it.
Yeah, I guess we haven't really talked about, that. I guess
I
we've
guess not as like an episode itself, but it's been
Yeah.
touched on, right?
Yeah, we've definitely touched on it. But it's definitely, it's such a huge topic that can go in a million different directions. You just bring up the devil. Okay, so are we talking Christian devil, like witches devil, trickster gods, like what are we talking about here? So, and this can go in a lot of different directions, which is why I thought it was a really cool topic to kind of bring up and do. I also think that it came to the forefront of my mind is because of a little bit of, I guess, I don't know, ridiculous pop culture
Oh my god.
shit going on right now.
Lil Nas
So
X.
the Lil Nas X video thing. So I did a little bit of calculation. So you guys hear these episodes approximately 3 to 4 weeks after we record them. So for you listening in the future, remember back to the long lost time of 3 to 4 weeks ago of when all this shit was going down. But yeah, the Lil Nas X music video, fucking, and the Satan shoes, and I was just fucking cracking up about the whole thing. The video is great, by the way. It's a great video. I liked it. I enjoyed it.
Me and Darian have
Darian
had a
can't stop
conversation.
reposting the gifs of him sliding down the fucking pole.
He's
Oh my
also
god.
so petty,
I
too.
Is
I
Darian
gotta
gonna start
quote
taking
one of
a
my
pole dancing
favorite
class?
I gotta quote one of my favorite YouTubers here and say, I think Stripper Pole to Hell was a Def Leppard B-side.
Shit, it might have been though. So yeah, and I guess maybe it was because it's been on my list of topic ideas to do for a while now, but I think that just kind of pinned it to the top of my brain, and I was like, all right, yeah, we should talk about the devil. And Scott is usually down to talk about the devil because Scott is very knowledgeable about all the nice folkloric witches devil
I
and
am.
stuff.
I do, and I am, yeah.
So
And I scream
Scott,
at
do you
scream at
wanna
shadows in the night.
and Sophia screams at shadows in the night, which is also
I
on brand for
mean,
Sophia.
mhm.
It's just like Scott with his with their little folk magic book, and then Sophia out in the yard like howling at the moon, like oh.
Well, maybe not howling at the moon, but like honest to God, I have had some run-ins with I'll tell those stories when the time comes. But I've definitely had some times where I've had to yell off at some shadows in the darkness to stay the fuck on their end of the lane.
For sure.
Yeah, sounds about right. So Scott, do you want to kind of open us up with a little bit of like a little history, kind of like
Yeah.
background?
Yeah, let's do that. All right. So, firstly, I want to preface this by saying, just so I can kind of appease our listeners, because I know we might get different groups of people. So the idea of the folkloric devil, we don't 100% know everything about this figure, or figures. The folkloric devil at times is sort of many beings. I think I've said before that the folkloric devil could be Odin, and it could be. There's also, I think, there's a Greek deity at times was Dionysus, and very old horned deities tend to be fall into this sort of over time, the folkloric witch's devil. Now the problem, the thing with the history and the witch's devil is that due to, of course, the Christian Church inserting, their adversarial god into, everyone else's stuff. The folkloric devil took on a lot of these kind of Satan-like attributes. However, at the same time, I would argue that a lot of the things that the Christian Church sees as diabolical, witches, pagans, occultists, we see as sacred or divine or
Yeah.
and otherwise, good for us as people, like revelry and sex and, healthy indulgence,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not everything in excess, right?
Right,
Or nothing,
exactly.
whatever. But, so to get into it more, the witch's devil, the folkloric devil, I should say, is distinct due to the fact that it does not its origins in folklore and stories from around Europe. Number one, they go back pretty far, at least talking about something similar to a devil-like figure. Maintaining sort of this continuum of this figure that represents, liberation, freedom of thought, sort of do as thou wilt, that kind of theme, that revelry, the partying, the enjoying sex because sex feels good, that
Right.
kind of stuff,
Not sex just
um,
for procreation.
right. What shall I call it? So the devil, in any of its incarnations, has always kind of represented that freedom that we spoke of in Jason Miller's beautiful prayer incantation. Trying to think what else can particularly be said. So once again, it is debated on whether the witch's devil, even within communities that observe or in some way acknowledge the witch's devil, the folkloric devil, which predominantly right now is the traditional European witchcraft community.
Mm-hmm.
Even amongst us, it's kind of debated on whether the witch's devil is a being at all. To some people, it is nothing more than an idea, sort of a well, not nothing more. An idea is very powerful. It is a symbol of of the witch. It is kind of you. It's kind of what you're supposed to strive to. The divine androgyne is another name for the witch's devil.
There seems to be a healthy amount, especially I notice it with trad witches in particular, but there seems to be a healthy amount of practitioners that are sort of embracing the devil as like, yeah, sure, fine, like if you want to if that's when you if that's what you want to give to me, right, like you're a devil worshiper, you're this or that, okay, then yeah, I'll be a devil worshiper. And I think by using and really like reading all of this stuff about like the folkloric devil, as we've kind of like drawn that little bit of a line between, um it makes it more relatable, you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
it makes this figure more relatable, that yeah, it makes sense, like that this being is the witch's devil, that is the witch's, that why witches would pray to him or whatever the case is, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, man, I'm sorry, there's so much lore here. Like, you
Yeah,
ever
there's
get lost
just
in thought about every like? Because I can go 1,000 different directions with this. I mean,
well, why don't we start with what a lot of people think back to, right? So
mhm.
I guess let's think back to our own personal like first experiences with the concept of the devil. Like
Okay.
can like do you recall what maybe some of those early experiences were, how you felt, like your reaction to
Um,
it?
it's funny because and this isn't me like trying to be like, listen to quote like I was so edgy, like
Right.
at I'm not trying to do that, but I was never afraid of the devil. I was raised, as I said before on this podcast, Roman Catholic. Um, but I was never particularly afraid of the devil. I think, this whole idea of being, he punished bad people. He punished murderers and rapists and that kind of stuff. But when people would talk kind of about his as I got older, more in my prepubescent 12, 13 and onward, I don't know, he just didn't seem scary. I don't know, there was just something about him that I was like, I related to somehow, but I don't really have the I still to this day don't have the words to tell you how or why.
I love that you just said that, because literally same. And I hate being, because sometimes I'm like, I wish we had sometimes I wish I had a different experience, just for the sake of talking about it, but literally same, because I never I felt like all those same things. Like I was never really, I had to like convince myself that I was worried or scared about the devil if I was, bad or something like that. Cause and especially as I got into my teenage years, I was like, yeah, I can relate to this entity. So what's so bad about him?
Right. Right. It's funny because in a couple years ago, like 2016, there was that show Salem that came on.
Yeah.
And of course, that show was, of course, fantastical. However,
Yeah.
it attempted to kind of create this feeling of what you would think old European magic would feel like.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something she said in that show that I still say to this day: "The devil you fear is not the devil I know." And I remember
Yeah.
when she said that, I was actually, I'm not gonna lie, I was in a computer course and I probably shouldn't have been watching it, but that's what I was doing instead of doing my work. But
As one does.
but what should I call it? I remember was like, yes, like someone said it, because this is
Right.
the beginning of, kind of my, I guess, really kind of leaning into traditional craft. But I I don't know. There was just something about. I mean, firstly, of course, like as we said, I think like what was it, a couple of episodes ago? I don't even remember now. We probably I don't even know if it aired, but we had mentioned, or I maybe did, about how I think every queer person has a little bit of religious trauma,
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
in varying sort of degrees. But the thing that used to make me mad about Christian people telling me I was going to hell was more because I knew that they were wrong. Like it wasn't because
Yeah.
they're hurting my feelings. It was, you're pissing me off because you're literally wrong. You
Right,
know
right,
what I
right.
mean?
I think for me what it was is something that I've always known intrinsically. I'm a good person, right? Like
Right.
I don't have the desire to murder people or fuck people over, or you know what I mean? Like it's not innately in me as a person. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I'm like, I am a good person. Despite what all my teenage self-loathing tried to make me say, I knew that in deep down that I was a good person.
Yeah.
I do good things. And so when, I had a couple friends, or I shouldn't say friends, classmates that were, deeply Christian. And they would say things to me like, "You're going to hell," like, and they would like really blow my shit up about it, and I'd be like, "Well, bad people go to hell, and I'm not a bad person, so
Right.
ergo,
Right.
get fucked,"
Mhm.
What about you, Sophie? I'm curious. Do you remember your first sort of like? Did you grow up particularly like was the devil like a big, like a scary thing, like a in your life?
Oh God. So yeah, I was raised Roman Catholic by my mom, and I only ever like found out that I was native when I was much, much older, like
Mm-hmm.
fucking 25. Well, actually, no, I'd been told stuff earlier, but it was only like I was sat down at around the age of
Right.
25 and told, fucking look, right? So like, no, the devil to me when I was a child, I had a weird relationship with him. When I was really young, I didn't seem that worried about him. Like I have a very vivid memory about going up to the priest of our Catholic church after mass had conceded, and we're in the side hall having like cake and coffee as they often do. And I went up to him and I was like, "The devil's back." And he's like, "What? No, Jesus got rid of the devil. He's gone for good." And I was like, "Oh, Jesus got rid of him, but he's back, and this time he's stronger than ever." And I've probably mentioned this story before, right? But
I don't think I've ever. I
Yeah, I
don't
don't know
recall
this
this story.
story. I would know this. I love it.
oh, and he got like noticeably uncomfortable, and my mom came over and grabbed me and was like, "Oh, sorry about that." Um, and that was like prior to me getting sick, because I got really sick at around the age 5 with IgA nephropathy, and I almost fucking died, right? Now, when you're raised Catholic and you're taught about after you die, you either go to heaven or hell, they're teaching children about their own mortality while they're still very young. So those were
Right.
thoughts that were actively in my head. So instead of just being sick and not necessarily knowing what was happening, I kind of had like some level of understanding that I wasn't doing great, like
Right.
I didn't know that it was like life threatening per se, but it definitely did like take an effect on me. And after that, like I always felt really kind of adversarial with the devil. Like I remember I have memories of times when I was really scared of certain parts of my house because my dad had a lot of anger, and there is kind of like negative spirits that have, I think, followed my family for a while and fed off of the intergenerational trauma and shit that's happened.
Right.
So I kind of encountered those a little bit when I was younger, and not really having the framework to understand it from like a more animistic or natural perspective. To me, it was all the framework of the devil, right? So those spooky noises that were happening that really shouldn't be. And eventually, like, because I started having paranormal experiences that would like indicate more so that like ghosts were real and stuff, and a lot
Right.
of other stuff that fell outside of like Christian world conceptions or Catholic, sorry.
Mhm.
That's what really kind of popped me out of the mold to begin with. And then when I was really young, if you can believe it, I was like, I think 11 or 12 years old, and I was like studying psionics. um, Actually, it would have probably been about 12 to 13 years old, was right around the time I started practicing psionics and trying to meditate and astral project and stuff. And what ends up happening is I had like my mom got upset. And I've told that story before with like an experience I was having with sleep paralysis, and she made me have to like kind of throw it all away. So like I don't know, I've never really had a good relationship with those more I like to use the term the sacred negative when talking about this stuff, because a lot of people tend to just think of negative energy as everything that's just bad and awful, and just be like, "Ugh, why would you ever
Right.
want to touch that?" And kind of like to try and keep themselves above that, right? And there is absolutely stuff that is unacceptable that isn't necessarily the sacred negative. Like to me, there's like the sacred negative and the repugnant negative, right? I don't want to touch the repugnant negative. I don't want to go even near it. But
Right.
like,
Yeah.
my friend asked me like, what's an example of the sacred negative? And I was like, you can't even breathe without negative pressure, right? Like
Hmm.
when you take a breath, that's a muscle like expanding down one way and pulling open the space that is your lungs, right? Like if you have a plastic bag and you put like a small little filter on it, and then you start to pull the bag apart at all the little parts that your hands could touch, you'll start inflating air into it. And that's a very similar way to how your lungs work, except your lungs are a lot thicker than a plastic bag, so the whole thing fills up, right? So you can't even exist and draw air without negative pressure. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
we're kind of reliant on those other forces to be able to exist. And I always kind of also struggled with like the trickster, and didn't necessarily like understand um why those negative aspects would be allowed to exist. But then I like got to actually listen to those stories more as I got older. And I because I came from originally a very Roman Catholic view, where the devil was all that was bad, right? And I could only really see the trickster in that light because I had only had like say Norse mythology, because like Loki is one of the worst fucking tricksters in existence. He is a fucking dick, right? He
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily do a lot of good. But if
yeah,
you look at other mythology, well, I don't want to say mythologies and relegate people's cultures to myth, you know. But if you look at other stories from different cultures, the trickster isn't necessarily always a force of evil, right? Like sometimes they might be, but generally, often what they represented was like very real human qualities that one either needed to like be aware of and watch out and not cultivate within themselves, or sometimes occasionally the trickster does do good and helps the people in a certain way, right?
Mhm.
And I actually can't even tell any trickster stories right now because it's no longer winter. So out of the stories I know, I can't even really say any of them or even say the trickster's name. So it's that's kind of something, but they're not inherently evil beings. Like to like I was actually doing a little bit of homework on this today and watching different videos on and reading different things on various tricksters from different regions, and like um in to some people, like the trickster is who's like Raven gave the world water or brought people fire, and the tricks that they played often could lead towards giving humanity things that they didn't necessarily have that could help them survive, right? So sometimes the characters are actually heroes to certain cultures, and they don't always do everything perfectly, amazingly virtuous because they're like a person. They're real and complex and have character and depth, and sometimes they might be selfish and prone to uh make a mistake so they can learn from it and grow. Like they're very like real, and you can take that lesson and kind of remember it and help develop yourself by that understanding of the sacred negative, right? That's like Hegelian dialectics right there. You have the self and the other, and I don't want to go into like the master slave dichotomy because I don't think that it necessarily needs to go that direction, but with the self and the other, you need to have something else so that you can understand yourself, right? It's just the basic nature of the universe, and I've kind of come to the point where I don't see the devil as like necessarily that bad. And I mean, like, I work with certain spirits that people might traditionally call the devil, although the Christians love to call fucking everything the devil. If you're like a crossroads spirit, you're the devil. If you're a gatekeeper, you're the devil. If you're like the ferryman to the underworld, you're the devil. You're participating in the devil's work. It
Yep.
feels like.
I
And
always found that a little lazy on their part. You know what I mean?
reductive. It's
Like,
absolutely reductive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I
go
mean,
ahead.
it's funny because even like all the things that you mentioned, Sophia, are all positions that can be found throughout the folkloric devil. Um, as you know, or I mean, trickster and folkloric spirits, folkloric devil-like, adversarial-like spirits. Um, the thing is that I think older populations of people used to understand, negative and positive, good and evil. Morality was different, and we
well, it's
understood it. I
I kind
think.
of understand it like this. Kind of what Sophia was saying, the sacred negative. So I guess there would
Mhm.
be like a sacred positive, right? So like
Right.
where there
Of
is
course.
reward, there is also punishment. Like that would be the idea of like those two systems in play.
Well, absolutely. Right. I mean, like, but
Kind
that
of.
kind of. But I
It
think that
doesn't even need to be as dichotomous as like punishment and reward. It can be something as simple as like um the enjoyment of sitting by a warm campfire and having your body just entirely enveloped by the heat, and the
Mm,
opposite being overheated and going outside and taking your coat off and having a cool breeze come and just blow at your sweat and wick away that heat and just have that connected peace. They're
Yeah.
complete opposites, but they're incredibly blissful experiences in and of themselves, right?
Yep. Yep.
I
It
like that.
doesn't necessarily have to be a polarizing opposite, you know?
That's true.
Mm-hmm. But right, but see, that's also another good point, though. Is another point that I keep thinking of is kind of in a lot of cultures when we hear about whether it be the trickster or whether it be the witch's devil or the folkloric devil, a lot of cultures speak to their necessity. Like we mentioned Loki.
Mhm.
There were many pagan deities that were sort of placated, not necessarily worshipped. They were sort of kept uh, calm by offering and ceremony. Um, you didn't necessarily have the same kind of relationship with some of those deities, and the necessity of um, the trickster, the necessity of this kind of subversive um, entity or energy or what have you. There's something that was important about that. Understanding how these things play into each other and they move throughout our lives. It like Sophia said, not necessarily polarizing, but just experiences,
Mhm.
in whatever form that may take, right? Pressure, negative pressure, as Sophia said. You know what I mean? I know what I'm trying to say. Not coming out right. It's all good. Anyway, move on.
Um, one thing that I kind of noticed throughout all of our like personal narratives about our first experiences with the devil is we all weren't really scared. We all didn't really find any reason to
Yeah,
be
that fear had to
afraid.
be learned.
Right. Like just like our initial fear, it was just like we were like, oh, okay, this is cool, that kind of makes me think about like this idea of like the witch blood or the witch's mark or having like a devil's
Mhm.
mark or something like that. Like if you are like maybe there's something there to that. Maybe we were all marked in some way that that we didn't have those, I guess, reactions that everyone wanted us to have to this concept of the.
Mm,
And another thing that I find interesting, especially about the witch's devil, like yeah, it draws from so much folklore, but it also kind of feels like this concept of the witch's devil was created for us specifically, like with us in mind, because so like the 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 Catholic Church, I guess we'll say, the Catholic Church comes in and starts saying, well, that's the devil, that's the devil, that's the devil, convert or die, kind of thing. And of course, what are you gonna do but convert, air quotes, and still practice your
mhm,
your shit, away from the eyes of the church.
mhm,
And so when the church comes in and they start saying, oh, well, that thing you do is the devil, and that thing you do is the devil's work, and I feel like what the kind of associations that start to happen in your mind are, okay, like, well, okay, then I'm doing the devil's work. If that's what it is, then that's what I'm doing. And there is a level of sort of like a sacredness to it.
mhm,
And I think like sometimes as a teenager, especially, like I feel like like there's always that joke, like everyone has their Wiccan phase or everyone has their Satanist phase.
yeah,
Um and I think there's a lot of, it makes sense. It makes sense why we go through that phase, because I mean we're taught to be, like just to be shoved into these boxes all the time. And what's the one character, I guess, that's consistent throughout basically all cultures is this idea of like a deviant character or a deviant something. The
mhm,
one that says, no, I'm not going to do that, or I don't feel that particular way. The only
Mhm.
thing that
The
I
rebel.
am sort of the one thing that we haven't really touched on, and I'm kind of curious about each of your take on this. So being queer, intrinsic, it's just or I guess really the church they only think about like the gays, right? Like, oh, you're gay, you're the devil, whatever. That's what the devil wants. Um, I'm curious why just the idea of being gay, like being visibly gay, like a lot of these Christian people, like they look at us like we are very, like we're dangerous, and I never understood that. I never understood why we're
Um,
looked at as dangerous, and I'm like, is that because of the affiliation with the devil and like devil magic, or the power of the devil?
I have a theory on this, but it's like a wild fucking ride, and it's like a lot of theory conjecture. So if
Yeah, I
y'all
mean,
want, I can fucking throw it out.
Um, Scott,
g-
let's hear yours first, and then Sophia, you'll present your
Yeah.
theory because I'm
I
very
agree.
intrigued.
I agree with Sophia as far as like even my idea is kind of there's a lot to it, right? Like, some people may say that gay people are possessed by Lilith.
Mm,
Lilith was said to be the spirit that made people gay in, a lot of the evangelical Pentecostal traditions of Christianity. Um, and then, of course, it also comes down to sometimes I wonder if it's deflection, sort of like we're the scapegoat, because once again, originally the Bible talked about pedophilia and having sex with people that were not of age.
mm.
Um, so, and then of course, over time, it got changed to, this kind of what is supposedly, man shall not lie with man as he does with
That's
womankind
the
or
other thing that
whatever.
I never understood, because a lot of times people take, like a queer identifying person, and they like associate that with like pedophilia, and I never understood that either, like why that comes about. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you're queer, oh, you must. Like it's that age old thing of like, oh, you can't, like a guy comes out as gay, it's like, oh, little boys, and it's like, well, come on now, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, why does
I
that
think
equate to
that
that?
specifically, I think, comes down to people's conceptions of evil and what they actually, how the mind works is people very often are built to be pattern seekers, right? You
Yep.
you find stuff that's associative and you group it together. So when they try to think of acts that are just heinous, like things that are just the worst things that they can conceptualize, it's not always necessarily something that is truly a morally wrong thing. Sometimes it truly is, like what you were talking about with pedophilia. Like that's just
Right,
wrong in every single fucking account.
right,
But when it comes to like homosexuality, that may repulse the person as well, and that will lead them to categorize it as evil. And it's very easy to conflate things like, say, bestiality, which is another very fucked up and terrible thing. You should not be fucking animals. Animals
right,
cannot consent, right?
right,
Hmm.
Like they'll conflate stuff like that, or even murder or like assault and stuff, because those are the furthest reaches of their mind that they can draw on to associate those things. That's why it's a repeated pattern. It isn't just like even queers who they call pedophiles. Like if you look at the whole QAnon conspiracy, it was the left, it was the Democrats, it was like any racialized group they didn't like. It isn't actually even about pedophilia. It's about
Hmm.
them specifically trying to utilize the most heinous things they can think of to disparage people they hate. And what's really
Absolutely.
awful about this is it completely overtones the actual horrificness of the act, that it happens to individuals and they have to live with it for the rest of their life, and it trivializes it. And then they say things like, oh, Biden's this and Biden's that, when like Trump has actually sexually assaulted people and shit like that. And they're
right.
always constantly willing to overlook the stuff that's very clearly documented, and shows all of that, because it's not even about trying to get justice for people who were assaulted in a very vile and horrific manner. It's about using the most vile thing they can to disparage other human beings, and that is it. And that's why it gets thrown against people.
Yep. I love that. That was like literally perfectly said.
So that's kind of where you were going, Scott,
Yeah.
in so many words. Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Because it always upset me, like that, and especially when you're young and you're starting to explore, maybe different spiritualities, that automatically you're just shuffled into the devil category, and it's it's incredibly frustrating, especially because when you're really trying to be taken seriously, you're like, no, like my spirituality is evolving, it's changing, it's this, it's that.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, oh, your devil magic voodoo shit, like they just throw in a bunch of terms that they don't know fucking nothing about, and just completely write you off. And if anything, that makes you it draws you closer to the arms of the devil. You know what I mean? Because look at you, you're being cast out. Just like in the, I guess in the Christian narrative of the devil.
If I also may say too, one of the things about the folkloric devil in particular is this otherness that we keep talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's something that is embraced or forced upon us doesn't really matter. But the otherness that is embodied inside of the folkloric devil, not just in folklore, which we find throughout the folkloric devil's sort of fairy connection. A lot of the time, he's considered the consort to the fairy queen. This sort of hidden, shadowy, unnamed figure, which also goes to the fact that a lot of the time, the witch's devil is more of a title or some kind of moniker, and not necessarily a named being.
Right.
But also, too, I would argue that, not argue, but I would say in my personal experience that the witch's devil, I mean, even working with the witch's devil in my personal practice, it makes me feel confident in this sort of like, I know that society is going to other me, so I might as well stand in that power, right?
Right. Yeah.
And in my otherness, and that be okay. There's no expectation from the witch's devil. The only expectation that I ever feel working with the witch's devil is to better myself. Even if I fall down, even if, whether it's I don't practice my magic in a year, or I go through a really depressive spout or whatever, as long as I get back up and prove to myself again that, like, I can keep going. That's the only quote unquote obligation I've ever felt.
I can kind of feel you on that, because I always think back to, like, as a kid, I was trying to be good and Christian and do prayers and stuff. And so when you would pray for something that you needed or wanted or needed help with, so you'd pray, but there was never this sense of like, well, are you listening? Are you not listening? Tell me, like, what's up? Like there was never anything tangible or palpable, or you were just kind of saying some words and hoping for the best. But so it's always like this idea of like God works in mysterious ways, or whatever, God doesn't answer directly, but the devil is always there. The devil always answers. You know what I mean? Like, you get direct results with the devil. So it, like, if you look at just like even in the TV show Lucifer, like, he's the deal maker. You need something? Ask the devil. Need a favor? And I always thought about that. The devil was just it was so accessible. I needed something stable, and that's the most stable thing that I kind of came across.
One of the greatest things about the devil, and to kind of go off of what you're saying, is also the fact that although the witch's devil is always there was never anyone to blame for your inaction or the things that went wrong. The witch's devil anticipates, or expects, I should say, you to live your, like, you were in charge. Like, the witch's devil is not a god.
No.
The witch's devil is not. The witch's devil, I actually joke, and I was like, the witch's devil is as close to Menel as
It's true though. I mean, I
it is. I mean,
feel
if you read the lore, if you read whatever, but yeah, like it's about you. as a person, as as a spiritualist, as whatever, you know, it's just about you doing what's right for you. Do what needs to be done, for yourself, for your family, for whatever,
For your
you
people,
know.
yeah. And I
And
think one of the best sort of organizations that embody the organization I really think that embodies the spirit behind the witch's devil is actually the Satanic Temple, because of their tenets, because those tenets really kind of bring forth like people make mistakes, people change, you know what I mean? Like you have to listen to science, you can't refute that shit.
mm-hmm,
Um
Mm-hmm.
and what I find interesting about the Satanic Temple is that they are atheistic. So no, they do not, you know, worship a god called Satan or the devil or Lucifer or anything like that, but
mm-hmm.
rather they sort of worship the symbol of what the devil represents, you know, as we've kind of been talking about here, you know, doing your own thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um but what I find so interesting about the Satanic Temple, and I think it's why I like them so much, they borrow heavily from Wicca, Tradcraft, the occult at large. You know, they for their rituals, they borrow heavily, I guess I would say from our stuff. And I like that a lot, and it doesn't bother me, you know. And I know some people could be like, "Oh, well, they're saying they're atheists, but they're doing witchcraft," and you know, part of me like giggles about that because I'm like, yeah, some Satanic Temple members are like, magic isn't real and atheism and blah blah blah, and I'm like, but y'all are doing like full scale rituals in your basement, so what's up?
Also, many of them,
Yeah.
especially in the Satanic Temple, many of them are also
Also occultist,
practitioners.
yeah.
Um,
Which is cool, and I think there is a way to balance being both. I mean, I do it, you know what I mean? I
right.
belong to a, you know,
I
this
mean,
organization.
Also, I'm still gonna hit y'all with that theory when you have a second, because I still haven't gotten to say it.
oh,
Oh, right. Yeah, do that.
Um, so definitely finish up this topic though, with the Satanic Temple, because this is like a total side
Oh,
divergence.
yeah. But that's just kind of what I was getting at is like the Satanic Temple. I mean, if you're actually looking for a very if you're a very introductory person to this concept of I maybe want to explore tradcraft, but maybe Satanism, but you know, look into the Satanic Temple. They have a lot of good resources, and they pull from a lot of old texts about uh Lucifer, and they even quote like some medieval fucking Renaissance era bullshit. So they really go deep into their philosophy, and so I do recommend checking it out definitely, because I think if there's one organization that has sort of like a cohesive vision of the devil, it would be the Satanic Temple. I would just really like their take on it.
I mean, even Brooke, to wrap up this little segment of this, even in like traditional craft, like the sabbatic craft, which is very satanic as far as Satanist thought, right?
Right.
Philosophy. Um, it's interesting because, like, if I could just note as well about the folkloric devil and the theological devil, there are some traditional witches that believe that you can't separate the theological devil out from the folkloric one at this
Mm,
point in time, just
right.
because their histories have become so muddled that really trying to separate them it's almost finding a needle in a haystack. It's just almost pointless.
Right.
Um, but then of course there are authors that I enjoy, like Robin Artisan, who is very anti-church, anti-Christian. He's very adamant. He's very angry. I don't know. I don't know if you would say anti,
Right.
but he's very angry. Um, and I've seen that from just his personal interactions on Facebook, um, mostly. But he's very angry with the church, and he fully is like, my traditional witchcraft has literally there's no no Christian folk magic, no nada. Like, those people would, if they had the chance, would burn us again, or burn us, excuse me,
Right.
if they had the chance, um, and so there are people who say that, you can't separate them, but in a lot of ways, I wonder, I personally don't care whether someone conflates them two or not. You know what I mean? I just think that
Yeah.
at this point, so it's
I agree.
interesting, just on a historical level, it's interesting.
So, Sophia, your theory.
All right. So this is going to be a real far-reaching thing, and I want y'all to chip in as much or as little as you feel you want to.
And this was the theory of why queers essentially are associated with the devil.
Kind of, yes,
Okay.
but it's what that is it's a platform for a much fucking larger discussion,
Okay.
right? It's like why they're associated is answered by the origins of where those concepts come from, right? Because queerness and that that idea of um it being anything other than normal is a very Western colonial mindset, right? It's not
Okay.
even like, and when I say Western colonial, I mean just like in a modern sense. It's not even like a queerness was discouraged in earlier people in Europe prior to colonization, right?
Right.
So if you look at that as well, there seems to be, in my opinion and observation, a correlation between the rise of what constitutes the colonist worldview
Mhm.
and the need for opposition to validate it. Okay, so the way it works is this: I've seen that a lot of cultures outside of colonial ones are collectivist very often. They think about the good of the people. It's the we, the us. It's not hyper individualistic. Like you do have your individual rights and responsibilities and your relationships, and you are responsible to your personal obligations, but you're not like different from your community.
Right.
You're a part of it,
You're
right?
not
There's not
othered
this.
in any
Yeah,
capacity.
and there's not this weird illusion that you're somehow different from your environment, right? A lot of people very intimately understand that the earth gave birth to us. We come from it. We need to take care of it. It's a part of us. The trees are as much our lungs as our physical organs are. Because if they're not producing the oxygen for us, and we're not producing the carbon dioxide that they consume, the symbiotic relationship doesn't exist. So
Right.
that is just an extension of our lungs in just a organic sense like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And colonialism, as I see it, is the foundation of the illusion of separation, right? The idea that you're different from not different but separate from other people, that you somehow are this isolated little universe, that you can be that demiurge, that all-powerful being, right? Like you can absolutely have power in your own right, but colonialism seems to stem from a disconnect, right? Because if you don't see other people as a part of yourself and the environment as a part of yourself, then
Mhm.
what they become is an other that you can do whatever you want to. If you don't need to worry about the emotions of the person that is in front of you, well, you can just justify whatever you want to do. Any single act or atrocity will be justified by the illusion of separation because you think it's not affecting you personally. You therefore don't care because you're blind to the pain that you're causing. This is what allows people to build up walls and kill each other and hate their neighbor. This is what allows us to poison the land and the water that we drink out of, and this is what makes us other queer people and create the concept of the devil. And when I was researching for today a little bit, I was watching some more traditional, it's like tradcraft European witches' opinions of the devil. And this one person said something that really spoke to me. He was saying how he viewed the devil as the land itself, and that's
Mhm.
why a lot of places get called like the
Mm.
devil's gulch or the devil's spine. It's because he made it. And that really spoke to me how
Yep.
like colonization really requires the othering of the land. That is the biggest thing the disconnect creates. It's all about mine and yours. The land becomes about ownership. You plot boundaries. You have forests that only you can hunt and gather in, or it's the king's title land. You can't hunt there unless punishment of death, right? And all of the bullshit that starts coming from settler colonialism as we know it today starts with how we view and treat the land and each other. And I think that that's what the core of it comes from. The worshiping of the devil seems to be the rejection of the colonial mindset that the land is inherently dangerous or wrong or other or profane. And there's always a connection in the imagery, right? Like the devil's always got like antlers or animalistic parts, and he's very often depicted in the woods or in the pathway, like when it's not like in modern Christian depiction, it always has a very clear connection to animalism and the land and our place as human beings being animals and accepting that, right? So I can then completely grok and understand why a lot of people want to work with that archetype, because it isn't meant to inherently be all of the vitriolic aspects that settler colonial society make it out to be. What it is trying to embrace everything that we have othered and start to form a relationship with it so we can truly understand our place in nature. And I think in that context, it makes a lot more fucking sense why people want to work with it. And I think then when you look at what we think of, as Scott was saying, the Gnostic devil, that then becomes just a buildup of opposition, because there's this constant Christian myth of persecution that they rely on to constantly prop up their crusade, right? Like they were not factually, historically, Christians were not sacrificed in colosseums to lions. That did not fucking happen. They were not killed for their beliefs. They actually had it pretty fucking good. And in fact, Rome didn't really want to cause a huge uprising by killing a bunch of more people after Jesus. So they co-opted his movement and brought it in and made it part of the Roman Vatican Church. Like that's why those texts are collected in that area. So everything you even think of in like modern Gnostic Christianity and Catholicism is the co-opting of that, right? And it's just it's just dirty all the way to its roots,
Yes. Oh god.
Insidious.
Fucking other people's cultures up and elevating yourself, and it comes down to white supremacy at its core, and that's the foundation of racism and all of the terrible shit in the world right there.
You know what, I feel all of that, and I really like everything you said, Sophia. You just have this way of like dropping it.
I try.
No, but I think I can really relate to what you were saying about like this colonialism thing, and we kind of talked about this in the urban magic versus rural magic episode, where we talked about like there's this colonial narrative of like land or man versus nature. Like why isn't it man with nature, and why is it always this like antagonistic relationship? And for me early on, especially combined with the fact that I grew up in a city, it was really hard for me. Like I devoured, like book-wise, I devoured every witchcraft, Wiccan, whatever new agey, naturey kind of book that I could get my hands on when I was early on in my craft, because I wanted to connect to it, but it was really hard to, because I was always taught that land is something you own. Land is not something that you don't own, that you have no power over. You know what I mean? It was kind of like that idea. Like it was never this idea that land is alive. Land is, and I everything that I was taught was the opposite of that. It was like, well, if you want tomatoes, you put tomato seeds in the ground, you grow them, but those are your seeds, that's your dirt, that's your tomato. Like, you know what I mean? It wasn't like a
Mm-hmm.
plant a community garden type narratives that I was fed, and so it was very jarring for me to unlearn that. And I don't know, sometimes, and I do it too, and I get on all these fucking young TikTok witches, but it's very difficult to unlearn a lot of shit. It's really difficult to go on this path. You know, that the path of a witch is not easy. The path of an occult practitioner, and like, I keep trying to make a distinction. I use the term witch very generally here. But like, the path of the witch is not easy. It's not easy. You will be ridiculed. You will be cast out in some circles of your life. It is not an easy choice to make, to walk that path. And I think, you know, that's I feel like, just, you know, the three of us, the fact that we're still here and we walked those paths, you know, like, it says a lot that we've come here, because those are some really deep concepts that we had to unlearn at very young ages. Very young ages.
And keep unlearning at older ages, because you never stop unlearning shit from colonialism. Like, the act of decolonizing and like learning and improving, it's a lifelong pursuit. And I think if you kind of try and treat yourself like you've arrived at it, it defeats the purpose of the entire practice, you know?
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
I don't know, like, it just makes so much sense. I guess your theory really kind of just brought everything together and like packaged it up.
I mean, it was perfect. I
Yeah,
mean,
it was
you know,
so
I
perfect.
love
I
the
want you
fact
to
that
write like an essay on it, you know, like, I want more.
I'm sometimes really awful at sitting down and writing stuff, because at
Yeah.
least when I speak, I'm allowed the space to say, if, but, hang on, you know, like, I
Yeah.
don't have to put it in super precise terms, because people fill the gaps a lot better than I could ever truly portray with my words, right?
right.
And when you're writing it in text, the text needs to have very specific structuring and composition to portray that imagery, and it takes like 20 times more effort on my end to have to sit down and write something out, as opposed to speaking about it in a conversational sense. That's why the podcast has actually been really important for me, because I can put a lot of my ideas out there in a way that is accessible for me, because it's not like I can sit down and write a couple thousand words a day anymore. I used to be able to do that in my early 20s when I had focus and time and better equipment and shit, but I just don't right now, you know?
Yeah.
So like, it is
But
what it is.
I must say, for you know, for someone kind of like, you know, when you came into this, you were like, I don't know much about the devil, but you know, I know the trickster. But like I said in the beginning, I was like, I think you'll find, you know, there's like a lot of the folkloric devil and the trickster. There's a lot of crossover in a lot of areas, and you did it perfectly. I love the fact that you touched on the devil being the land itself. That was actually something that I was intending to also talk about.
Yeah,
I
I'd love
I
to
just,
hear
you know,
your
it takes
take
me
on that.
longer to arrive at those places because, like, I get overwhelmed. Once again, like, the history of the devil it's complicated. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, just hearing everything we've said so far, it's not one dimensional. You know what I mean?
Oh, we
And
have barely scratched the surface of this topic, and you
oh,
know,
I know.
like, and we're not like a super academic teaching kind of podcast. I wouldn't say
No,
we're a
no.
teaching podcast. We're more like a theory lecture podcast, sort of.
Yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah.
like, here's a cool thought podcast, you know?
Yeah,
We're food for thought.
exactly.
But
You know,
right.
we send you down the path. We give you the little seed of the hey, maybe I should read more into this, and then you go do it.
But
Because
I
we
mean,
can't
like,
give you answers.
no, no. I mean, it's just, you know, I don't know. I don't know.
No, it was good.
She's gone though.
It's so funny sometimes before we we pick a topic. Some topics, like I'll say a lot in the episodes, like I have no idea about this, and I'm just very inquisitive naturally, so I'll jump in with questions. But Sophia, you were actually like, I don't know much about the devil, but I just think it's so funny that how you just like had this like amazing
Well,
theory that like put everything together in one awesome package.
I did research for that, though.
You did do your homework.
Do take
Yeah.
that a note, yeah, because I didn't feel like I was as confident coming into this episode. That's why I had to kind of like look at it and go, what can I really dissect out of this, right? So I'm actually gonna try and grab the YouTube link of that witch who had the theories and put it in the show notes, just because they shouldn't go unnoticed, and they deserve a shout out, and I'll get their
Yeah,
name for
I'm
Yeah.
actually really excited. I'm also curious if maybe I've already seen that video.
KELDEN.
I just don't
KELDEN is
remember
their
it.
name.
KELDEN, yes.
Oh, yeah, I love KELDEN. KELDEN is amazing. I have KELDEN's book. I'll link that too.
Yeah, The Crooked Path.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you'll have KELDEN and Jason Miller in the show notes for
Wow, we're just dropping a bunch of big names in this.
But yeah, no, that was literally perfect. I also love the fact how you talked about how politics influenced perceptions of the devil. That was another thing that was being talked about from something I was reading earlier or watching. I can't even remember. A couple days ago, actually. About sort of it was Robin Artisan. He made the point to say that the theological or the Gnostic devil, as Sophia called it, is political. And Sophia gave the reasons why.
Right.
About Rome and whatnot. And the interesting thing is, even theologically, like if you look back through the Abrahamic texts throughout Judaism, particularly in older Christian texts, you will find not much mention of the devil at all. The devil, I think, in the Bible is maybe mentioned a handful of times, and in Judaic texts is, from what I understanding, from what I've read previously, is also very seldom mentioned.
Yes. Actually, I did kind of want to say a couple things on that. So there is a podcast out there called Black Mass Appeal. They're a couple members of the Satanic Temple. They belong to a group, Satanic Bay Area. They do a lot of cool episodes on, like, if you want to dig into the topic of the devil, go there, because they talk about all the different angles. It's kind of, they run a whole podcast about the devil, so that just shows you how deep this topic can go. But they actually did an episode in which they looked at the Bible, the entire thing, Old Testament, New Testament, and picked out the parts of where the devil is actually mentioned, and it's like 3 or 4 times. It's like not a lot. So basically, in that particular episode, what they had kind of come to is that our modern understanding of the devil has literally been shaped by the media. But where does the media, where do movies, I don't want to say the media like journalism, but media in terms of like books, movies, games, stuff like that. But they draw their inspiration from folklore, looking at folklore of other cultures and traditions. So it's just kind of funny that like the devil is probably the most real, tangible thing that's been like created by the people unintentionally.
Recent research suggests, it's not solid 100%, but that the devil is a potentially proto-Celtic animistic deity, which of course takes on a very different, as far as the way it is interacted with, due to the fact that it's kind of this proto-Celtic, pre-pagan, potentially deity. Once again, kind of harkening back to the devil is the land itself, the wild nature of things, the wild nature of man, or humankind. This is why I said the devil, when I talk about the devil and I mention, for instance, like the devil's ability to shapeshift, I mean that not just in like a bird to a man. I mean in the sense that the devil can shapeshift from an idea to in a symbol to a spirit, a consciousness. It's the devil is not one thing. The devil is a lot of things, and it kind of seems to be this force that is ever encompassing. So when I joked earlier and I said, the devil is as close to Manuel, from the movie The Craft,
Right.
there was a reason why I made that joke. This idea
Right,
that the
because
devil.
there's that scene where Nancy's like, Mano, he's the rocks, he's the trees, he's the grass, he's everything.
If the devil and God played football, he'd be the stadium that they played on.
Yes, 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 that's what she
Um,
says.
and it was that, that exactly is it, right? The devil, I mean, even down to, once again, to talk about that as well, to kind of really delve into this animism, the devil being associated heavily with fairy lore, in Wales and Scotland and Ireland. Once again, this deep connection to primal earth, kind of like from the darkness born, the devil,
Right.
um and of course we see that, in the more, I don't want to call it modern, but classical telling of, the Baphomet, right?
Right.
Which, the flame betwixt the horns, which is now a common theme that we find. But once again, halos, flame between the horns, and the idea of just horns themselves were very popular amongst animistic societies, as far as the idea of ascension, reaching up to the heavens. It all speaks to, once again, this sort of I don't want to call it omnipotence, but omnipresence, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know what I'm saying?
No, I completely understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, when witches or whatever, when we talk about the devil's many faces, it's deeper than just, like I said, man into a bird. It's an idea into a consciousness, and a consciousness back into a symbol. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's
It's all
psychological.
encompassing, yeah.
It's psychological. It's nature. It's our nature. You know what I mean? It's yeah, and that's why, for instance, people have really enjoyed utilizing the classical symbol of Baphomet, because of Baphomet's inherent androgyny, and
Right,
his
yeah.
his intent, or their intended symbolic meaning, which is the ascension of an occult practitioner. We all, the idea is to all strive to be the Baphomet, right?
Huh. I actually
Understanding your
didn't know
own,
that.
yeah, understanding your own, like, the idea is that a practitioner of magic, whatever system of magic that is, doesn't matter, that the end goal is to learn to find the feminine, the masculine, the dark and the light, the all of that stuff, and bring it into its true place, which is like a one thing, to
Mm,
crush the illusion of separation and bring it all back to source, bring it all back together.
sort of like the Buddhism idea of enlightenment, sort of?
Yeah, actually, it's just the occult version of ascension or enlightenment. Right,
Hmm.
exactly. And that's exactly what Baphomet is. It's a symbol of the occultist, or of occult enlightenment, if you will.
Well, that just makes me enjoy the Baphomet even more than I did before.
Mhm. Well, that's why, I mean, but even like in the symbol of the Baphomet, which is why I always appreciate it. It's why I keep it on my altar. I don't
Mm,
worship the Baphomet as anything. I just, but I love clearly with, a bosom, a feminine bosom, and a penis, and, the idea of, like, with the hand motions, the benediction,
mm-hmm.
the two fingers pointed to the sky and pointed to the ground, with the black moon, and the crescent moon above.
Mm-hmm.
All of it, I mean, the entire thing is about balancing forces, and understanding that all things in the end become one thing, you know when they're broken down to their pure essence. Yeah,
Mm.
this is why I get passionate about the witch's devil. I know that I choked up earlier, but um hearing Sophia kind of like take us out of school, I was like, yay. Everything that I wanted to mention, you said perfectly. And I was like, well, Sophia's got it.
Yeah.
But
And
you mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, please go ahead.
No, I was just saying it like you actually inspired me by doing that, having the control to kind of be like, here it is, and you gave it to us the way you did. So it actually made me feel like more confident, which is weird because I didn't even realize I was feeling like unconfident about it. It just was something like I realized as I'm like tripping over my words. I was like, "What are you doing?" But no, I'm really thankful that you said what you said because it was literally details. Like everything that you said was stuff that I intended to mention over time in the podcast. You just were able to put it all together in a perfect stream of thought.
It's like we're
Yeah.
witches.
One thing I keep coming back to is the imagery that gets associated with good and evil, and I kind of want to touch on that a lot because in another video I was looking at, somebody was explaining the wordplay between God and devil. God is, you add one letter to God and you have the good, right? God is the good just shortened down, right?
Okay.
The devil is evil with just a little more. You know, if you look at the wordplay going on there, there's a lot of that negative association, and in modern context, in modern popular imagery, the devil always, here's the thing, God never seems to grow, right? He's already created all of creation. He doesn't get bigger. God is just what God is. The devil always grows because he's used as an engine or an image for the other in the opposition. So anything that the powers that be want to deem as, like, say, lewd or ridiculous or degenerate or something they want to socially oppose, they cast under the image of the devil. A very classic representation of this is BDSM. Okay, it's almost always depicted in a satanic manner. Like if you look at any type of popular culture depicting like hell and Satan and like the shit that's gonna take you there, it's always like people dressed in PVC and fishnets and spikes and goths, and there's red lights and there's rave music going on, and like they're worshiping the devil and having their party and shit, and that seems to be a much more modern addition because that wasn't necessarily anything that they would have associated with the devil way back in medieval times, right? And in fact, if you look at medieval pictures of the devil, he's much more monstrous. He's got like horns and fangs and hair, and he's meant to like be very bestial, right? And as we became beings that were less centered in the experience, because if you look at what occupies the human psyche, and anything that we're afraid of being relegated to the devil really makes sense, right? So it makes sense that humans are afraid of the dark. Humans are afraid of the dark and the forest at nighttime because anything could be sneaking up on you. There's no guarantee of safety. It is something that constantly wears away sight, right? And jumping at noises in the woods is something we're all pre-programmed to do, right? So that's like the most innate forms of what they can start positioning as the devil, It's the noises at night. It's the things that come at 3 a.m., creeping through your camp, sniffing at the edges of your tent. And if you don't have your protections, you better watch out, But in the modern times, we don't have the same fear of land that we're used to. We've got this like sense of self-inflation and almost self we're so megalomaniac, I don't know if that's the right term, or narcissistic, that we view ourselves as gods, and like we've completely subjugated nature. Like there's nothing in it that can contest it,
Right.
and we have science, and we can disprove that monsters don't exist. Never mind the fact that, I'm sure governments look into all kinds of mysteries, and UFOs and all these things they tell us aren't really real. I wonder why they actually spend money looking into things that aren't real. Um, and it comes down to, in modern times, when we want to make stuff the enemy, it has to be stuff within ourselves, or it has to be other people, right? So a lot of other cultures traditionally were depicted as devil worshippers, specifically indigenous cultures, right? So earlier on in the day, the devil was often depicted as a indigenous person, or anybody who worked with voodoo was very often conflated, or hoodoo was conflated with working with the devil, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they wouldn't care if you were working with Papa Legba, that was the devil, right? So,
Mhm.
and in that case, the devil's stretched to take on that identity, right? Um, and in our modern times, it's much more human, right? He's become this sexy guy. The
Yeah.
devil was not depicted as a sexually appealing man way back in the day. That was just never a thing.
Yeah,
Like
that is a pretty modern take on that
at most,
because
they might
yeah,
have depicted him as attractive when he was an angel, because all angels are beautiful, made in God's image.
right.
But post cast down, he became a beast.
Right.
Even
So
even in the
go ahead.
folklore that just to real quick, even in the folklore that does depict him early on as is and any kind of human like guise is terrifying. Many times the
Mm-hmm.
accounts are talking like they speak to feeling as if you are going like you anticipate to be killed. Like this, the man who appears, you can never see his
Mm-hmm.
eyes. He's always
Mm-hmm.
shadowed by a wide brimmed hat or some other hood or covering, and he appears to you and he speaks to whoever should he choose to, and you feel more than intimidated. It's pure terror. You know,
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah, so it is interesting because like you said, it did change this kind of sexy devil, right?
Hmm.
Because even before, even in a human guise, he was terrifying. Which does
Hmm.
have its place, but I'll let Sophia finish.
Yeah, because like temptation was never traditionally seen to be a hot guy. Like if you look, and this is the weird thing of modern times, hot and muscular men were basically emblematic of patriarchal society, right? It was like the king, the hero warrior.
Mm-hmm.
And in modern times, we don't necessarily have like men as these big, strong protectors and warriors. And we also kind of seem to have like a cultural identity crisis going on with men, because they sometimes seem to not necessarily know what to do with themselves, or the roles that have been culturally passed on to them that aren't necessarily appropriate, i.e., toxic masculinity. So, like, they're constantly kind of having to, like, redefine themselves right now. And I mean, everybody is right now, because that's like us living in modern times and having to constantly adapt to what's changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, like, yeah, I don't know. The devil didn't seem to always be like this attractive person. And temptation very often back in the day was depicted by women, right? It was the
Right.
temptress. It
Mm,
was women being this object of lust, and it's women that'll take you to hell. It was not the devil himself coming up to seduce you with his body. He would have his servants. There would be emissaries of him, right? So like I think there's like this weird shift in modern times where we start thinking of them as like this attractive guy where you might have a personal relationship with him, and I don't know where that came from, and it's kind of interesting to examine, and I just wanted to kind of bring that up, right?
I would
mhm.
love to do some digging, like some pop culture digging, kind of like start to maybe hopefully follow a trail of breadcrumbs that would lead to some kind of theory.
Mhm.
That could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, where did the sexy devil come from?
Yeah.
I mean, I do have something. I do have to go soon, just as a heads up. But I do want to say before I do, I have a little bit longer. But that also may have to do with Lilith and Lilith's
Oh.
Lilith, as Sophia was saying, Lilith was also often seen as the succubus, the mother of demons, the seductress, the enchantress. Many women, once again, interestingly, by the way, this is going to be something interesting to both of you. Not only was Lilith said to be the person to possess queer people, she was also the spirit said to possess witches.
Yeah.
So I want you to think about that for a minute. Just once again,
And she's
for
depicted
thought.
as the Red Woman, and that's probably got ties to Babylon, and I see where this is going.
Yeah.
I
Also,
do
too,
want to do a whole Lilith episode at one point.
I might want to bring on my friend Kimberly for that
Oh,
one.
Yes.
Lilith and the Red Woman. Oh, because that also ties into Ellis. I'm sorry, what did you say, Scott?
I would love to bring my friend Kimberly on for that episode. She's
Yes.
worked with Lilith for years. She has Lilith's seal on her arm.
Oh, hell yeah. Bring her in.
Yeah. But anyway, one of the things I also wanted to mention, Sophia, I love that you brought it up, was this concept of fear and the devil.
Mm-hmm.
One in a really in a pretty old I don't know exactly how old it is, but there in traditional witchcraft we have this thing called the housel or the red meal, and as you kind of give up bread and wine, as you do a transmutation of blood into wine, or wine into blood,
Mm-hmm.
And bread into flesh thing, you say, I give this in the devil's name for fear, for care, and want of him. But on another note, there's an author, a very popular traditional witchcraft author, who lives in the UK. Her name is Gemma Gary, and she wrote an amazing book called The Devil's Dozen. And in this book, she discusses using fear as a trance tool, and this ritual to commune with the devil. You are to secret yourself off to some lonesome place, whether it's an abandoned cemetery or an old barn or what have you, somewhere where you won't be bothered, and you are to strip naked and erect a compass about you, and at each of the 4 points of the compass, you are to place a candle of red or white, I can't remember which, and you are to lay in the form of a pentagram, and no matter what happens, you can't move, you can't turn your head, you are just to sit there and close your eyes. If you hear a noise, if you hear a bump, there's an invocation, of course, to be said, but you have to stay there for a set amount of time, and the fear is said to sort of eject you from your body over time, because you lay there completely, naked as a newborn baby, and you have nothing. You're just bare, and that is all. And she designed this ritual to call upon the devil through this deep fear. But the devil and fear, his fear, I think many times, because I felt it, but not in the way that other people have. I haven't been particularly blessed in that way, I guess. But it's a deep terror, but sort of not of the devil itself, but of the things that I don't know, and all of the things that I could become, and all of the things, like it's the fear of potentiality itself. It's weird when you feel it. That's the only way I could describe it. It's afraid of it's a fear of what could be, and you feel that in the devil's presence. Does that make any sense, or is that weird?
No, that makes
No,
sense.
that makes sense.
So fear and the devil have a big history together.
I actually kind of think we could kind of wrap up on that note too. I kind of like that as like a concluding sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
No,
kind of
I mean
feeling
it
that.
just feels like a good place to stop because it's making me, kind of go down a rabbit hole of my thoughts, you know what I mean? Thinking about that
Hmm.
ritual. Plus we are coming up on about an hour and a half, something like that.
Yeah, that's about the
Yeah.
ideal.
Um and I can feel my attention span going out the window and I'm trying so hard.
Well, I'm glad I actually was able to form a coherent sentence.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a good episode.
Oh,
So we want to do a
but
little sign off for everyone?
yeah. Well, real quick, if I can
Yeah.
just do like a as like, but before, how like we do our last minute
Oh
thoughts.
yeah, any concluding thoughts?
Um, just to our viewers, because once again, I know that the history of the devil is not set in stone, and the devil has many faces. Um, understand that I personally feel that it doesn't matter where you fall on whether the devil is a spirit to be communicated with, or an idea to strive for, or if the devil is related in any way to the theological devil or not. Either way, I think that you are getting the same out of your interaction with the devil, no matter where you land on that issue. So I do want to leave with that.
Alright.
I feel that.
I guess my closing thoughts would be don't be afraid of nature.
Hmm.
Like I've expressed things that have happened in previous episodes that I've been afraid of in nature that have spooked me, but like I keep coming back to something I heard in another podcast, and it was that we if we don't form a relationship and an understanding with something,
Hmm.
then we're always going to be at odds with it and by
Yes,
nature seek to destroy it, right? And
absolutely.
if you don't go out into nature and see what actually goes on and what the desecration of the lungs of our planet looks like and the arteries that are the rivers, like that's the water that keeps you alive, and we're running out and there's not a whole heck of a lot left, and if we keep bastardizing the other and just letting people get away with unfettered colonial bullshit, there's not going to be a world to pass on to the next generations for too much longer. And
Hmm.
it's not even that there's not going to be a world, but there isn't going to be a world that's hospitable to us.
Mm-hmm.
The world will go on without us.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
get out there and get involved and do something, because we're running out of fucking time and climate change is real.
Get out there and do the devil's work.
Mhm.
Mm.
Do the devil's work and save nature.
Yeah, really.
Final Fantasy VII, get your ideas from that. I'm not saying anything.
All right, so with that, so thank you everyone for hanging out with us in this one, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
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 Everything magical comes from Mother Nature, and I was kind of like, that's not really how that works. I didn't fight him, but I was like, Mother Nature itself is a source of power. There's spirits in the land, sure, but I was like, the magic comes from inside, blah blah blah. But I didn't feel it anyway. Not the point. The point being is he totally like he was like, every time I start to get something, it falls away. He also acknowledged the fact that well, I know what it is. It's Lucifuge Rofakel. I know exactly what spirit it is. And I was like, um, we were talking about like how, all the deals and stuff he's ran from, and he opens up about another experience. One he had after the thing in the trees. He one day decided to take a ride around West Virginia, and around that area, like real crossroads exist, like all up over that area. And he found himself on a just a four-way crossroad, and he talked about a man that he met And this man, like, and the thing is, like, I would know, like, if he met, like, the witch's devil, right? Like, I would know what that interaction looked like versus something else. And
Right.
this is like, whatever, and it asked him the same questions, but of course in his mind he didn't put two and two together. And I was like, well, that's the same being. I was
Right.
like, it didn't forget you. You know what I mean?
Right. It came back.
Right. It just in a different form. And to make a long story short, like, you know, it's funny because he doesn't realize. So in order to have bound that deal, the spirit, that, like, that time when it appeared to him, it didn't say me, it said his father, my
Mm.
grandfather. Now,
Hmm.
my grandfather, of course, is now deceased. However, here's the thing. I didn't realize this until now, that technically speaking, his fulfillment, although was technically his father, any murder, any death by his hand would have counted. And he did kill someone. He did.
Mm.
So the fact of the matter is that he ended up completing the transaction without even realizing he did it. In
Huh.
self-defense, no less. But of
Right.
course,
Right.
once again, like I said to him, because, like, it's funny, because he was like, because he was complaining about being sick and how he thinks that someone's attacking him. And I was like, and at first, I was like, I don't want to get involved. This isn't my business. I'm
Right.
not
You're
getting
like,
involved. This isn't my business. I'm not getting involved. This isn't my business. Now, of course, I sit here in my little ugly, destroyed hovel that is my room. And of course, I kind of have the bird's eye view of everything. And I kind of know what comes in and out of this house
right.
almost at all times. So it started off with him having this intense dream that I was like, oh, this is a vision. So get this. So he has this vision of, he's in a line in what in his mind would be hell, which I'm like, sure, I've been to hell dimensions before in my sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he's in a line, and at the end of the line, like, everyone, like, and everyone has to walk backwards. But when he sees them walking past him, they all have this metal mask, but inside, he said he could see sort of this bladed patterns, and everyone's pattern was different. And they were putting these masks on people's faces and, like, cutting them into the bone. And basically, he ends up getting, like, branded or whatever with this mask. And he says he wakes up feeling, the pain of being branded by this mask. And I was like, well, shit, that's pretty intense, right? And he said, like, I could see it and hear it and smell it. And I was like, oh, man.
Right.
So when I heard him kind of go into that, I was like, fuck, I guess I got to get involved. So I was telling him about some of my experiences. Coincidentally, that same night, me and Darian had an experience with a not so friendly spirit that just kind of appeared. Don't really know where it
Mm.
came from. And it was eerie and uncomfortable, and I'm not really easily scared by that shit. Like, I like to take my time, because as we said on the podcast before, sometimes the spirits we're afraid of, it's more because they're trying to communicate in a way that we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're not interpreting well, and then we always jump to, when we're uncomfortable, it must be bad, and I try not to do that.
Yeah.
And I didn't, but this one was truly uncomfortable. Like, it felt predatory.
Yeah. You were like, ooh, like you need some extra juice for that.
Right. So anyway, we went into this whole conversation about his situation and how I said to him, I was like, you're sick because you're sick. But I said that when you're attacked by something in this way, when you're cursed, like, almost like life, when you are literally cursed, the literal definition of, curse lifetime kind of thing. Um, I was like, it attacks you over time, right? Like, and it could rest a little while, right? Because
Right.
but when you're being hunted by a spirit, it's not the same as being hunted by a practitioner. For a
Right.
practitioner to truly curse somebody, you have to have hell of a mojo. You know what I mean? To
Yeah, because
really
you
lay
have
down a real
to,
curse.
you gotta sustain that for that
Right.
long, and especially if
Right.
you're slinging curses at another practitioner, it's like obviously we have tools for getting rid of those things.
Right. Exactly. So I went, I went in and I was like explaining to him that it's because of like this dark serendipity. So like your choices will always lead you somewhere dark. But I tried to do like you are kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy within your own curse. You know what I'm saying? Like I tried to be like, you perpetuate it from the choices that you make. You know
Right.
what I mean? And that's kind of how these things take you.
Right.
And oddly, he was very silent and very accepting of that fact,
Wow.
which I was like, whoa. And what you call it? I had another dream. I had a dream that same night. By the way, I also forgot about this, where I'm standing in the middle of like, like the you ever see like old viewing rooms for bodies? Like I'm like talking like early Americana, like 1700s, 1800s, like where it would be like a wooden coffin and like a table.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean.
And I'm standing there, and my father's on the wooden table in a wooden coffin, and I have someone behind me. I couldn't see them, but it was a woman's voice
Hmm.
saying, "You have to burn these herbs," and she's wearing like a white robe. I could only see her hands, and she hands me these bundled herbs, and she says, "You have to burn these in order to release him, or else he'll suffer."
Hmm.
And I was like, "What the hell?" And then and then I found out, however long about, his dream. Um, so that was weird,
Could you
but
identify the herbs?
no, no, they were like, it was like I really couldn't, like it was all blurry. Like I could see through my eyes like what I was looking at just fine, but like I couldn't, like when I looked down, everything was blurry except for her hand.
Right. I wonder what those herbs might have been.
I don't know. But I mean, unless of course it's just saying cleansing herbs or like some kind of
Yeah.
releasing, you know what I mean? But anyway, um things were like adding up really weird, and then it was another, like something to make it even stranger is that me and Darian ended up having to go for a walk because I was like, that's just too stressful. But the problem is too is that the entire time I'm talking, I start to feel like something's changed in the air, but not in a good way. And I was
Right,
like,
right,
fuck,
right.
what happened? What did I do? And as we're walking, I something tells me to look back because the moon was at our backs, and I didn't see it when I was walking because the where it was positioned.
Oh, were you guys out walking around when the moon was
Can you
full
hear
the
me?
other night? You're very quiet, but I can hear.
Yeah, you're gonna have to turn me up on your end, but this is the best I can do. I'm gonna have to call warranty on these, because they're fucked up. Like the right earbud's not working as right as the other one is.
Actually, you sound fine now. I think it just took a second for it
Mm-hmm.
to catch up. So you sound like you usually do.
Yeah. Okay.
So you can hear us. You just have one earbud.
No, I have two earbuds. It's just one of them is a little bit fucked, and I'm gonna try and pull warranty on it.
So what were you saying, Scott?
So like the moon was behind us, and I instinctually at one point
Was
I
it
was
when it
like,
was
where is
full
the
the other
moon?
night?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I looked behind us, and it was this orange moon, and I know, like in folklore, an orange moon, some might call it a harvest moon, but when the moon has that orange hue to it, it means like the gates to the other world are open. It's a time when magic is really powerful.
Well,
Um,
it was the worm moon.
mm-hmm. And what you call it? Once that dissipated, because the orange eventually goes away.
Mm-hmm.
Once that dissipated, when we were on our way back, there was a very obvious ring around the moon. Now I know like what a ring is and what a ring isn't. Like some people think like a ring is just like sort of like the clouds around the moon kind of
Right.
thing. But that's not a ring around the moon. A ring around the moon is like a glare around the moon that appears in the form of a ring, like a halo.
Yeah.
And it actually genuinely had a halo, and I was like, well, fuck, like I've seen two of them,
You're like, God damn it.
and that was the second time. And I was like, damn it. So I don't know, like things feel different around the house, not necessarily bad, but it feels like it's like this strange, like unbalanced static.
uh,
Like everything feels a little off. I came back home from our walk and I felt really dizzy.
did you check your portal?
No. No, I didn't, but I will do
Maybe you
that.
should check your portal.
That's actually a really good idea, yeah. It's funny that you say that because now that I think about it, well, hold on before we go there, real quick. And it's funny because during the conversation I had with Darian on our walk, I was telling him that, throughout my entire practice, like I have had run-ins with Lucifuge, mostly because, a lot of my friends were Luciferian. Pretty much all of my closest magical friends for a long time were Luciferians, and all of their magic pretty much is working with the infernal forces, So I've had these weird kind of crossovers, and even they were always like, "What is your thing with that? Like, why don't they like you, like, innately?" And I was like, "Family history." You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I have a weird family history. Yeah. So that kind of came to light last night, which was really weird, and that like opened stuff, and that was fucking weird. But if anything, it actually really, really kind of helped me a little bit because it shocked me into like seeing shit again. Like I'm like, I don't know, I'm kind of coming back a little bit. So
You sound a little more lively.
I mean, I don't like the purpose of it, but I think it's because generally speaking, when he's about to leave, it reaches a pitch. And because technically speaking, he has the house pretty much, like the people love him, like he just has to see her, whatever, see the house. He just, like I said, bullshit kept happening, and he was never able to actually go visit the house. It happened twice. But whenever he's about to leave, it reaches this fucking crescendo, and it happens every time. And when I say every time, I mean dating back from, pre-high school on.
Right.
Every time he's like right there, like every time he's about to get out, he just blows up, or his whole world just goes, and then it just like as if nothing ever happened, it levels off. It's really weird. So I'm wondering if I'm kind of getting, I don't know, a little bit of a kick in the pants because, as much as like, don't get me wrong, like Darian is quite capable of like energy work. Like Darian's energy work is like, mwah, chef's kiss. But like, he's not trained in, and not that I am either, but I've at least studied enough to know how to handle Lucifuge. And he's like, and as you all know, like I'm not big on like calling all the quote unquote demons of the Goetia demons. I think most of them are maybe like daemons, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's very few of them that I actually think are diabolical in nature. But Lucifuge is one of them, Belial is another, and Aim is another. But that's only from experiences and like just personal encounters while they were doing conjurations and stuff. Things that I picked up on, things that the spirit would, say or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, so I guess I don't know, kind of like waiting for the shoe to drop, but
yeah.
I'm really not trying to wait for that to happen because,
Because you're tired of it happening like that. You're like, why do we have to repeat the cycle every time?
right.
Like,
And
come
if I
on, let's
catch it
just get it over
now,
with.
right, but if I could catch it and kind of subvert it, you know what I mean? Or, stop it in some way, move it somewhere, then I fully intend to. Oh, by the way, last thing. In the beginning of that conversation, when I joined in while he was telling my mother about his nightmare, he tried to do that thing I was telling you and Sophia about, the kind of other people can, you can't thing.
Yeah.
He was doing that whole like, I've seen stuff, and I was like, well, guess what? I've been practicing magic and occultism for 18 years and counting. I've seen
And
some
I
shit.
have seen some shit.
I was like, and it was funny because what else? What did he say? Oh, he did it again. He was kind of like, I don't know anybody, because when he was like thinking it was someone working on him, he was like, I don't know anybody other than Scotty, he called me, who has even an inkling of knowledge about what they're doing. And I was like, an inkling. Says the one who says that all magic comes from nature, but we won't go there.
Okay.
And But I actually managed to not be intimidated by it. So I don't know if it's that I'm just a different person now, or maybe I was able just to consider the source, but somehow it had the reverse effect. I was more empowered than not. Like, it was like, you can say that all you want to, but I know what I've experienced. You know what I mean?
I think it was just you're older and wiser, and I'm sure a lot of what you've been doing in therapy is helping you take the shit that he says and like just let it roll. And
That too. I do take it differently. Also, I've been maintaining a practice, if you will, of every time I go downstairs in the morning, I make sure to like just I put my hand on my chest just to feel my heartbeat, and I just say like and I'm not really big on like positive affirmations, but I just state like intention, I guess. I'm just
right,
like
like I will not murder this dick today.
I actually say I keep all of my psychic, spiritual, physical, and mental energy to myself, and I do not give any of it away freely to his psychic or narcissistic vampirism. And I say that every morning, and it does really well.
Whatever
Also, I
works when
wear
it
my
comes
amulets
to it.
too.
Huh?
I wear my hagstone and my silver pentacle as well, and
Oh,
that
there you
helps.
go. I actually really want to get silver pentacle. The one I have is silver colored, but it's not.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I got my silver one. As much as I love my my simple pewter one from that witch's protection box kit thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it was old and rusty and
Yeah.
time to retire.
So much occult jewelry computer, and like don't get me wrong, like it's cool for like quick little small things, cheap things. It's for something that you want like long term,
Mm-hmm.
computer is not gonna hold up.
Did I just cut out?
I think Jay did.
Oh, no.
Oh, I cut out?
Yeah, you're cutting out every once in a while. I wasn't sure what it was. I thought maybe you were stopping mid-sentence and doing something,
I
but
could
I
be
think you're
sitting a
cutting out.
little far from the mic.
Do
Okay.
you have noise suppression on?
Yeah, I do it a little bit because there's always a lot of background. Adjust this.
I don't mind hearing the background noise as long as I can hear you clearly. Yeah. And it's not like noise suppression helps the noise not get picked up on podcasts because the recording's going on your end.
Basically, I'm just talking about the input sensitivity on my mic. Because if I'm sitting back here, you can hear me, right?
Yep.
And it doesn't
Yep.
cut out. Yeah, I just had it.
All
That should be good.
right. So we're talking about Satan,
Yerp.
right?
Unless anyone has any kind of last minute suggestions.
Well, I don't necessarily have a lot to talk about on the devil specifically, but if we make it about the devil, the sacred other, and the trickster archetype, then
Mm-hmm.
there's like a whole fuck ton I can talk
Oh,
about.
totally.
There's
Yeah.
definitely more relationship between the folkloric European devil and the trickster of native lore than there
Yeah.
is between the theological devil and the trickster of native lore. So like
Yeah.
the kind of the trickstery sort of earthbound nature of each kind of the older versions of the theological devil would, so I think that's fine. I think that actually would actually give really, really awesome, interesting perspective into kind of this, although different, but significant, like something significant about history and older, more indigenous forms of magic, and
Hmm.
traditional magics that and kind of their similarities, and yeah, you get what I'm trying to get at.
Hmm.
I
Well,
just
y'all are gonna be proud of
remembered.
me. I did my homework for once. What did you remember, Jay?
Hey, Scott, at one point you sent me something. It was like Devin Hunter read it. It was about the witch's devil. Like affirmation.
Oh, it was by Jason Miller.
Jason Miller.
You want me to get it for you?
because
Okay.
I think that would be a cool way to
Oh.
open the show.
Jason Miller's friends with a lot of the DKMU folks, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Jason Miller's awesome. Jason Miller has a really awesome history. He studied in Tibet for 2 years, studying Tibetan Bon, which is like the indigenous religion of Tibet, which is not Buddhism. Buddhism came later.
Buddhism is a colonization.
It's true.
What I
It was.
heard.
I mean, it is. Like, I
Oh,
mean,
I found it. Take refuge in the devil.
Yep.
Actually, this would be a cool
Yeah,
way
if
to
we go
open a
at it-
show. Do we want to alternate, like, taking a verse and or admin chat?
I don't know. I kind of don't want to say something. Like, if y'all want to, go for it.
Yeah,
I
me and
mean,
Scott,
yeah.
like, we could go back and forth.
You know something, Scott?
Yeah, what's up?
I think you would definitely, if you're up for it, might have fun hanging out with us tomorrow night on the Domus party, if you're feeling it.
That actually sounds really cool. I have therapy tomorrow instead of Friday.
Well, yeah, I had thought about that, and your therapy usually takes place earlier on in the day, right?
Around, like, it'll be 2:00.
Yeah.
So
So
let
if
me-
you wanted to unwind, because this is an evening thing, and it's going to be basically like revelry, like we're going to be watching videos or like maybe playing mini putt online, and people are going to be joking and laughing and having fun. Like it's going to be like a stress relieving thing. It's not going to be tense at all. So you're
Yeah.
definitely welcome to join.
I'm definitely gonna I definitely want to see how I feel, but it does sound really fun though. I like the
Yeah.
idea of a festival of revelry
Yeah.
because Lord
The-
knows.
I'll tell you the history of the great strumming. We did it a bunch of years ago because a lot of people who had been involved with the group had like put in a whole bunch of energy over the course of the years and a whole bunch of like servitors and egregores and whatnot. And a lot of it wasn't necessarily being used anymore, and large parts of it had kind of like fallen into disrepair, and there was like kind of a lot of toxicity within the web, and we were trying to like figure out how to sort it. So the idea kind of came about that if we were to kind of like
Can you hear me?
strum the web
Okay.
like guitar strings, welcome
Hello.
back,
Mm-hmm.
that it would kind of clear all the gunk out, right? So that's where the name the great strumming comes from. And we did the ritual on April 1st, which caused a whole bunch of things to happen, and it also like did the ritual in our own personal lives first. So like it cleared out all the shit in my life that was holding me back from doing my magical path, which was like 2 relationships and a lot of other shit. So it was it had a lot of kick behind it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't necessarily do that anymore, since like a lot of the pressure has been let off, and it's turned into more of a way of like letting pressure off by having fun and like doing a little maintenance in the meantime, you know? So it's kind of
Right.
like the spring celebration and release of all the buildup over the winter, and shaking it off and getting out there and screaming and jumping into the water and having fun and sitting around a campfire and shit, you know? So
That
yeah.
sounds lovely.
Yeah.
I can't wait till later. Oh man, now you just have me thinking about campfires.
Yeah, what we
Yeah.
did last night, we were literally just sitting around drinking on Discord in a shared video call where we could all see the same campfire, and some people were sitting around a literal campfire IRL, and we were just drinking and having a good bullshit. It was fucking real good time.
Lovely, yeah.
So,
all right.
So we're not gonna do the regular intro. We're just gonna read that. We're just gonna and then I'll introduce the topic.
And
Right.
I'll hit the bong while you're doing the topic, and Scott will probably have the most to say and want to jump right into it.
Sounds
I'm
good.
sorry.
No, don't be
Wait,
sorry. It's a topic you love. I want to hear you talk about